Now we get to the next phase, and that is the fourth phase according to the brochure I have. And my only request is that I wish there was a fifth phase, because he knows, Professor knows, number 4 is not very auspicious in China. So maybe there should be a fifth phase, which should be the valedictory session. So, Professor, now it's yours.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so according to my outline, we have covered the census and residency registry, and we have shown that the Chinese government during the Qing dynasty was not able to conduct census, and then they didn't consider Tibetans as subjects of the Qing Empire. The next thing I'm going to talk about is the Amban and the Colonial Office. The lady over here has sort of complained that I haven't given any attention to India. In the Colonial Office section, there will be some mention of India in a very uncomplimenting way. And again, please don't throw tomatoes at me, because again, I'm just translating original documents. Okay, so if you are offended by what they say about the Indians, well, please bear with me.
Professor, before you begin, we will not throw tomatoes, because tomatoes are really expensive these days.
Okay. I need to switch to another file. How do I do that? I want to switch to another PowerPoint file. There's a mouse over here. Okay, thank you. Wait a minute. It's not? Okay. Okay. Fine. Oh, okay. Good. Thank you. So right now I'm going to, right now I'm going to talk about the Amban. Everybody, is there anybody over here who has not heard the term Amban? Everybody knows what Amban is? You have never heard of Amban. Okay. One of the major justification of used by the PRCs in claiming sovereignty over Tibet is that the PRC tells the Chinese and the world actually, and it's of course in the white paper, the 1992 authoritative white paper, that China has been sending Ambans, which is the governing officer, to Tibet. And so also, not only that, the PRC also tells the world that China, the Qing Empire, and of course the Republic of China also, in the two eras, they had Lifanyuan, okay, which are of course given the duties to govern both Mongolia and Tibet. Okay, so the fact that they had what amounts to a governor in Tibet sent by the central administration in Beijing, and also the fact that they have Lifanyuan, which is a colonial office, that proves that they have been ruling Tibet. Incidentally, the term colonial office is very, very debatable. The PRC would strongly object to this translation, by the way. They claim something else, and we'll actually see part of the dispute as we go on. But anyway, so this is actually what I said over here. If you look at the white paper, which is the most authoritative statement from the PRC, it says that from 1727, High Commissioners, the Tibetan term is Amban, okay? And in the Western literature, the Western authors call that person the Amban, okay? The PRC uses a different name, calls it High Commissioners. They were stationed in Tibet to supervise local administration on behalf of the central authorities. It's like, you know, the imperial representative, and then blah, 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 and so forth, okay? So altogether, you know, each one will go there for 3 or 4 years, so they have altogether 100. So is that correct, okay? Okay, first of all, you need to understand that, of course, High Commissioner is a translated term. Amban is also, actually, is a Manchurian word that is used by the Tibetans to refer to this person, but the official Chinese title is Zhu Zhang Da Chen, okay? And what it means, the Zhu means station in, and Zhang means Tibet, and Da Chen means grand officer. So actually what it means is that it is the grand officer, in English it would be the grand officer station in Tibet. And a generic term actually would be 驻 location at 大城 station in blah 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 大城. And it so happens actually is that this term itself, contrary to what the PRC is trying to tell people, is the other way around. The fact that you have these 驻藏大城 proves quite conclusively that Tibet was not part of China. Why? It is because 驻藏大城 is a standard form for diplomats, for envoys. First of all, you have to know that the Chinese are very particular about having the correct terms. For those of you who know something about Chinese, we always talk about 正名. Okay, 正名 means to make sure they have the right name. And for something as important as this, okay, they would not mix up the names. The officers that are sent, okay, to govern on behalf of the emperor, they are called 总督 governors, okay, senior governors and governors 巡抚, which is governors or sub-governors, and then they will have something like 道台, they will have something like 首府, and then 知县, 知府, 知州, and all these people, but never like that. But on the other hand, they will have things like station in England Grand Officer. They will have something like station in France Grand Officer. But what is even worse is that they will have something like station in China Grand Officer sent by France and so forth. So what I'll do is that I'll give you these direct quotations, okay, to prove that. There are actually three categories of usage, or the ways that the Grand Officer station in so-and-so that are used. So the first one is that an ambassador sent by the Qing Empire to a foreign country was routinely labeled as Grand Officer station in blah, blah, blah. Okay, so instead of 驻藏大臣, you have 驻英大臣. So this would be an example, and this is from, of course, Li Hongzhang. Of course, I hope you know who Li Hongzhang is. It's about, it's like Churchill. Okay, so that is in the brief support submitted to the emperor by Li Hongzhang. Okay, and it says over here, proposal to organize Chinese merchants to form companies, blah blah blah, and so forth. This is an official document. It is proposed that China's Grand Officer station in Britain be consulted, blah blah blah. So the usage is actually very formal. It's done by some very influential people. Okay, this is another example, and this is the official document. They then do it by the other way around, and that is the ambassador that's sent by one foreign country to another foreign country, and they will also use this format as country so-and-so, Grand Officer station in country B. And then you can see this is a quotation, and that is court paper submitted by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on suggested regulations of sponsored overseas studies, and they are talking about Thailand over here. Misbehaving Chinese students will be sent home to maintain our respectability. And the example is that, look at what Thailand does. The Prince of Siam is supervised by Thailand's Grand Officer station in France. Okay? So, in other words, if you have China sending a diplomat or ambassador, it will be, again, 中国驻英, 中国驻法大使. Over here, talking about Thailand's 驻法大臣, okay? Thailand's 驻法大臣, okay? The third category is the worst category, okay? And that is Qing official documents labeled ambassador that was sent by foreign countries to China, also as Grand Officer station in China. So this will be one example, and that again is in the official regulations and documents that are in this book. And it says over here, China-France meeting, Vietnam border trade, blah, 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 and so forth. Agreed between the two countries that trade locations be open shall be selected jointly by China and the French Grand Officer station in China. So, in other words, if China were to say that just because we have sent a Grand Officer station in Tibet, therefore Tibet belongs to China, so that would mean that China would belong to France, okay? Which of course, well, I mean, the Chinese will know that's not true. So to clarify the matter actually is that during the Qing dynasty, there were two standard terms used for this diplomat. One is 驻藏大臣、驻法大臣、驻英大臣, okay, the grand officer stationed in a certain country. But then the other term would be 驻法公使. So actually it's this thing. It's actually 驻法大臣 or it's 驻法公使. 公使 actually would be, it's a term that is used today. Today actually it's called 大使, but at that time it's more like 公使. It means the ambassador, okay? So this is another format, and these are two standard formats. And if you actually go to a database such as Basic Books, and that is of course 基本古籍, okay? This is 基本古籍, which is of course a database consisting of tens of thousands of the classics, okay? It is Qing Dynasty and before, and this is a database that is of course operated by the People's Republic of China, okay? So if you go to a database and search through the tens of thousands of books, and you will see how it's like over here. I will just concentrate on these two columns. There are two standard formats. One is the Amban format, the Tibet format, okay? Grand officer stationed in Tibet, or grand officer stationed in France, or grand station in Britain, or whatever. So that's called 大臣, okay? The other one is called 驻, okay? Location, and then it's 公使. And you can see that, for example, for Britain, okay? Out of the times when the Chinese ambassador to Britain was being sort of mentioned, 44 times they were named as 驻英大臣, okay, grand officers stationed in Britain, and there were 15 times when the same people were then called or termed as as official envoy station. In other words, it's 驻英公使. Okay, so 驻英. So in Britain, it's 44 versus 15. For Japan, 23 times it says 驻日大臣, and 5 times it says 驻日公使. Okay, and then so forth and so forth. So, but in total of all these ambassadors, 83 times. Okay, you added up 83 times. Those ambassadors that were sent by China to these foreign countries, they were called by this format, and 45 times is called this format. Okay? And then, of course, what is even, of course, worse is that 驻华大臣 appeared 50 times in these classic books. Okay? And that is, these are the French ambassadors, the British ambassadors, and the Spanish ambassadors to China, and they were called 驻华大臣. Okay? So in other words, the very fact that China sent, the representative to Tibet and called that person 驻藏大臣, grand officer stationed in Tibet, instead of calling it the 总督, which is the governor, means that the Qing Empire actually knows that, well, they are not allowed, and the Tibet government probably wouldn't allow the Qing Empire to send somebody with the title of governor or general, so it has to conform to this sort of the standard format. Right? And this, of course, was made available or possible by PRC databases. After they have digitized all the book, you can go and use the database and do this statistical analysis. Before that, it would be impossible because I have to look through, tens of thousands of books. Right now, all I have to do is go to the database, search for these terms, and then count the number of hits. Okay? Now, the next aspect is, remember, there's two major justifications. One is that PRC says we sent an Amban, okay, a governor, and I've just shown that no, it's not a governor, it's just an envoy, okay, your official title says that. The other argument is that, well, we actually have a Lifanyuan. Now this term is rather confusing, particularly those of you who do not know Chinese. The word fan has several meanings. Yesterday, I was talking about Xifan. That fan is not the same as this fan, okay? Xifan means Tibet. But over here, this is Fan Shu, means a Fan region. It means it's like a protectorate or a foreign land that has some kind of a subordinated relationship with China. Okay, except that, of course, I think I already mentioned just now, the Qing Empire referred to even countries like Russia and England as their fan too. Okay, so but anyway, over here, so the argument is that we had an office dedicated to ruling places like Tibet and Mongolia. Now, what I will show with the citations that will come in the subsequent slides, and that is that Fansu actually means colonial possession. In other words, the Lifanyuan was China's colonial office, which of course the PRC strongly disagree. Okay? But I'll show that, well, actually, unfortunately, that turns out to be the fact. Which would mean that even if it is true that Tibet was under the rule or the governing of the Lifanyuan, that would simply means that Tibet was a colony of China, which of course is rather embarrassing. Okay? But what is also true, it turns out that Tibet was actually only a wish list colony. China was, Qing Empire, I'm sorry. Qing Empire was really trying to put Tibet under the rule of the colonial office, but without success. So it was actually a wish list colony. It was not even a real colony. Okay, so there are really a two-steps thing that I'm going to show you.
Fan region?
What?
Fan region?
Fan actually, okay, means it's like a subordinate protectorate. It's a Chinese term, and that's the reason why it's under dispute. I am going to show you that they mean it as something like colony. China, I'm sorry, PRC claims that Fan simply means that it's a subordinated region that belongs to China. Okay, and therefore, once you are Fan, like the Chinese position is that Tibet is one of the Fansu, and therefore it's part of China. Okay, but the term is really, you see, that's a problem over here. We have a Chinese term that has Chinese meanings, and they have the English terms, colony. No. Actually, the closest term that I know of is not in English, okay, but actually in German, Mark, M-A-R-K. Remember, yesterday I was talking about Denmark. The idea would be very similar. Denmark, the Markland, okay, the Markland, which is like a borderland, which owes some kind of subordinate relationship in the Holy Roman Empire. If those of you who are familiar with European history, you know that there was this the Holy Roman Empire, which is basically a German empire, and then they had all these places in in Denmark, in Sweden, and the Netherlands, which had sort of a very informal kind of a relationship. But otherwise, as I've said, in fact, this is subject to debate as exactly what the meaning is. So, this is very interesting. If you look at the official white paper, this is what they say, okay? And that is, they claim that the Chinese central government established a Bureau of Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs, and this replaces Qing's Lifanyuan, a Fan office of handling Fan affairs, for handling Tibetan local affairs. Now, if you look at the entire document, you see something that's very suspicious, and that is, this is the only time the Lifanyuan was mentioned in the entire white paper, whereas the Amban argument, the grand officer station in Tibet argument, was brandished 17 times. Now, it shouldn't be like that. The reason is this. If you want to prove your sovereignty over a place like Tibet, okay, the fact that you have a department established to rule it is a more important and more convincing criterion than sending an officer. So if you are using the office argument 17 times, why are you mentioning this Lifanyuan only once? Because it actually is a much stronger argument. But then in the other books written by Chinese, then it's used all the time, okay? And it's a major sovereignty argument, okay? So we want to look at that. First of all, again, you can see that the unfortunate fabrications. First of all, the quote that I gave in the previous slide, that is my direct word-for-word translation of the Chinese language version. You will go to the website and look at the English version, okay, of the PRC's document. You see slightly different, okay? It says over here, the Bureau of Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs was established by the central government to replace the Qing dynasty's department in charge of Mongolian and Tibetan affairs. Now, this is what I showed in the previous slide. I'm reproducing it to come. Okay. The real Chinese word is Lifanyuan, okay? And the PRC translates it into the department in charge of Mongolian and Tibetan affairs, which of course means something very different, because this department means that it's in charge of Mongolian Tibetan affairs, and that's not what Lifanyuan means, okay? So what does Lifanyuan mean, okay? And that's a very embarrassing sort of a question, at least to the PRC, that it's okay. So it's because if you look at the official documents, the fund, that's to answer your question, it covers something much wider than Mongolia and the Tibetans. For example, if you look at this very authoritative book in Qing history, the fund regions includes Okinawa, Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines, Afghanistan, blah, 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 and so forth. Again, a whole list, okay? Again, I don't think it includes any of the Indian places, okay? And it's not because they want to ignore you, it's because they just didn't, you probably would not think of that as an insult. They don't call you one of their fund. Okay? Anyway, but it was not included. Okay? Moreover, the Department of the Foreign Affairs, which is the Lifanyuan, was asked to handle all kinds of diplomatic matters with many other foreign countries, including Russia and Britain. For example, if you look at the Qing history draft, there's this record over here, Russia, blah, 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 blah. And then the Foreign Office officially commanded the Russians. They were asked to deal with diplomatic transactions with Russia. And then, of course, according to the record, Russia then sent again tributary envoys. Okay, that's what they claim. Okay, whether the tributary, the Russians certainly don't think of them as tributary envoys, but the Chinese perceived them and recorded them as tributary envoys. And then our emperor, the Qing emperor, then looked at the submission documents and then told their own court ministers that, oh yeah, this outer Fan region submitting tributes is a great event. Okay, in other words, they referred to Russia as an outer Fan region that should be handled by the Lifanyuan. So Russia was considered as an outer Fan. Okay, and then of course again it's documented that all the transactions will be handled by the Foreign Office. So it was not a department of Mongolian and Tibetan affairs. This is another example. England, okay, if you look at the Qing history draft, which is the official history of China, then in this section, okay, page 4,517, you have this record. Initially, England's tributary envoy, again, England was named as a tributary country, and the envoy submitted the credentials and documents, and the Foreign Office did not receive them with the correct protocol, okay, and they were punished for that. So the Foreign Office was really asked to, okay, so actually Foreign Office is very much like a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It's not sort of a ministry or an office for governing Mongolia or whatever. Now, Foreign Office is a colonial office, okay, which of course the PRC disputes. They think it's an insult. They think it's the sort of an antagonistic attitude of the foreign historians in translating the Foreign Office into colonial office, because the PRC's position is that we don't have a colonial office. We are against colonialism, okay? Colonialism is something that's practiced by the English, by the Americans, by the Spaniards, okay? We have never practiced that. And what I'm trying to show is that, well, actually the Chinese documents themselves actually prove otherwise, okay? The Chinese, they are all for colonialism, okay? And we'll see that. So let's look at this book. Again, what's so grand about this book? Okay, why should we even look at this book? Okay, the author Zhang Deyi. Okay, Zhang Deyi is the Emperor Guangxi's English teacher. He was allowed to remain seated next to the emperor while Qing's princes and major officials knelt in front of the emperor during the imperial audiences. He became China's ambassador to Britain in 1902. He coined the Chinese names such as technological items as telegram, bicycle, and screw. He was the first to introduce Chinese readers to the steam engine, elevator, lifts. Okay, this is the American term. Sewing machine, pipe, gas, punctuation marks, and even chocolate. Okay, so I mean, this is some guy who knows what he's talking about. He was a time when China was having contact with the Western nations and was doing the translation. So this guy, how does he translate it? Okay, this one is it. Several days ago, the British chief officer in the Foreign Office, okay, and the Foreign Office is actually the Colonial Office, okay, Chamberlain. In fact, Chamberlain at that time, in the year of you go to Wikipedia, you can verify that Chamberlain indeed, in 1903, was the Secretary of the Colonial Office of Britain, okay. So this guy translates the Colonial Office as the Chinese term Fan Bu, okay, and so it's done by somebody with quite a lot of authority. This is another example. Again, who the heck is this guy? Why should I listen to him? I don't know whether you recognize his name, Aisin-Jero. It's a family surname of the imperial family of the Qing Empire. So the Qing Empire's family surname is Aisin-Jero, okay? So actually, Aisin-Jero Zai Zhen, okay, is the great-great-grandson of Emperor Qianlong, and he was sent to foreign countries several times and active in late Qing governmental reforms. It was Qing Empire's Minister of Commerce. Remember, I said that there are only 6 ministries, so being a ministry head is pretty senior because there were only 6. So he was the Minister of Commerce and Minister of Industry and Commerce, okay? So again, it's somebody that, well, he knows, so he should represent, some authority over here. So when he was making up this diary with a mission to Britain, this is what he wrote. Singapore proposed to build a Confucian Academy, submitted to the governor of Singapore to be forwarded to the British Foreign Office again, okay? So again, the British Foreign Office, which is the office, the Colonial Office, is routinely translated as Foreign, okay, by these Chinese authorities. And so this is another example over here. And then, of course, we have yet another one. Where I'm not going to repeat that. Okay. Just now, what I was showing you was that the Colonial Office of Britain and the other countries were translated as Fan. Right now, I'm showing something that is related but somewhat different. I'm showing you that Fan possessions are considered as colonies, or both ways. Okay, colonies equals to Fan. So this is another example. Xie Fucheng is a very famous diplomat at that time during the end of the Qing dynasty, ambassador to UK, France, Italy, and Belgium. And this is the diary of diplomatic missions, okay? And then that's what it says, okay? I'm going to give some attention to India right now, okay? Not in very complimenting terms. Record of the 19th. Britain's own country consists of 3 islands of England, Scotland, Ireland, India, and other foreign possessions, okay? Colonies, foreign possessions. They have a population of 80 plus million, okay? And then, of course, you're talking about Cuba. Cuba was discovered by well, that's what it says, okay? Columbus was Spain, and then it colonized and sent official government. It became foreign possession. Again, the Chinese term is equivalent, is used to represent the colonies over here. Okay, again, India was featured several times over here. Today, India to the east and America to the north are all British Fan, okay? Ying Fan, okay? So these are. And of course, the guy who said that is Yan Fu. And of course, if you know anything about modern Chinese history, this guy is the one who translated The Wealth of Nations, The Theory of Evolution, and then The Spirit of the Laws to China. So these are all sort of the major people who. So this is even more direct, okay? And that is by directly calling Tibet a 殖民地, okay? In Chinese, it's 殖民地. You know, actually, most Chinese are brought up to really be very antagonistic to the term 殖民地. When they say 殖民地主义, okay, it's like these are evil, okay? Without actually knowing that their near ancestors, maybe the great-grandfather, actually just thought it was very natural, okay? And so over here, you can see that this is, again, primary source document. It's research on Qing Dynasty records, okay? And this is an official report. So, Li Fan Bu, okay, the Fan Office. This humble official notes that the Fan Office was initiated by this dynasty, and then recently we have a colleague, a Yishi, okay, a Yishi officer, submitted the following. And the facts that's reflected by it is also interesting, okay? The Fan Office was reconstructed into the Fan Ministry. In other words, Lifanyuan was reconstructed into Li Fan Bu, okay? And to change the name from Yuan and Bu, okay? Why did we do that? And he was saying that, well, it was changed last year. The original purpose was to emulate the chief colonial officer, 殖民大臣, of the various countries, including England, okay, the Western colonial powers, and the special establishment of the India office. In other words, what they're saying is that we want to do to Tibet exactly what Britain has been doing to India, okay? It's very clear. India's status within it, it's a colony. It's no escape of it. I don't think any Indian has any doubt that the British didn't consider you as their brothers or of the same race. Okay, I mean it was a colony, and that was the same. So anyway, by converting an office to a ministry, and this including it among the entities with executive powers. In other words, previously the Lifanyuan had no executive powers But now we are trying to change it with executive powers. Why? It is because we want to enable the foreign office to actually manage the various Mongolian banners and Tibet. In other words, in the past, the Lifanyuan was just, for ceremonial purposes, handing this so-called tributary envoys, handing them $150,000 and stuff like that. But right now, we want to start managing. So actually, before this was submitted, which is towards the turn of the century, they are admitting that the Lifanyuan actually was a ceremonial office without any managing power. Implementing this new structure necessitated the selection of proper talent. And what you see over here is that the Lifanyuan at that time are only Mongolians and Manchurians. Okay, this is very important, and I'll actually show you greater details later on. The Lifanyuan, which is the Chinese office for, according to the PRC, to manage or to govern or to rule Mongolia and Manchurians, by the PRC's version, actually they only had Mongolians and Manchurians, no Tibetans and no Hans. Think about it. Why? Well, the Manchurians conquered Mongolia. They don't see why they have to let the Hans to help run the management. It's very much like the British would hire Indians in India to help them to run India. The British would hire Malayans to run Malaya in Malaya, but of course they wouldn't hire Malayans to India to run India, right? Because why should they allow the Malayan people to have the privilege to earn a salary to govern India? In other words, they are willing to share some of the governing duties and some of the governing stipends and salaries with the Indians for India, but not to the non-Indians, okay, who are also the British subjects. This is the same thing over here. They, of course, were Manchurians because they are the conquerors, right? They have Mongolians because this office is primarily a Mongolian office, okay? That's the reason why there's no Tibetans. Because it doesn't govern Tibetan, but it governs Mongolians. Also, why is there no Hans? Well, it's none of your business because, you see, why would want to share the power with the Hans? They conquered the Hans, they conquered the Mongolians, they conquered these places, and they each will be shared by the local people. It's the same thing. It's like the British, sharing Indian governing power with the Indians and sharing Malayan governing powers with the Malays. Okay? So over here, I would like to plead to Your Majesty to order the Foreign Ministry to break away from the old rules, identify personnel with expertise in colonial affairs, 殖民政策, and then to employ them regardless of whether they're Manchurian or Hans. What this guy is saying is that give us, the Hans, some jobs at least, give us some vacancy, some job opportunity. Okay? So that's what it is. And then, of course, over here, this is a very important person, Zhang Yintang. He was one of the Ambans sent to Tibet after the departure of the invading force, the second invading force of Britain. The second British invasion was in 1904, and after they retreated, then this guy was sent. He was one of the very few Hans that was given the position of Ambans, because previously all the Ambans, they were either Manchurians or they were Mongolians. Okay, they just make sure that the Hans don't even get a chance to not to rule Tibet, but even as an ambassador to Tibet, they didn't give a chance. But this was one of the first Hans. This person is highly esteemed person in PRC's literature. The PRC praises this person as one of the most patriotic and sort of a capable administrator that tried to improve the condition in Tibet. Okay, that's a PRC version. Okay, so let's see what Zhang Yintang says. Okay, this is a telegram to the Foreign Ministry on a draft proposal to handle Tibet. Okay, because as I say, he was there 2 years after the British left. He went in and tried to sort of handle the Tibetan situation, so to speak. We must capture Tibet's governmental control as soon as possible. Train soldiers to develop education. To capture governmental, this is a straight translation. Again, if you feel offended, please don't throw, well, I know you won't throw them because they are expensive, but maybe rotten eggs is cheaper. To capture governmental control, we must grasp the current window of opportunity during which Dalai has yet to return. There was a time when, of course, when the British came, he fled to Mongolia. Okay, so at that time, Dalai Lama left Tibet and went to Mongolia. So in the absence of Dalai, okay, we are going to capture the control, which would mean that it reflects the fact that they had no control, okay, but they want to capture it. So we are going to deploy 100 or so Army Academy graduates, surreptitiously arranged in order to be efficient and effective. Other suggestions are award Dalai and Panchen honorific titles and favorable annual stipends as a system for Indian Fan kings. Over here, okay, this Amban is really perceiving the Maharajas and the Rajas as equivalent to the Fan kings of China. So they are trying to, again, what he's saying is that we have to try to do in Tibet, to do to the Tibetans what the British have been doing to the Indians. Okay? Okay. Emulate is a continuation of the same submission to the imperial court by this Amban. Okay, and let's see what he says. Emulate the royal protocol used by the government. Because what he's claiming is that the governor of India sent by the British government behaves like the king or the emperor of India, and then of course we should then of course send somebody to Tibet and be the governor of Tibet, which would act like the emperor of Tibet, and to have these Tibetan local officials under them. Okay, so emulate the royal protocol by the governor of India, thus naturally establish the status of the master country. Now, this is actually very important. And again, a lot of people don't realize that because they don't read the original manuscript. For those of you who know something about Chinese, okay, Chinese language is that the mother country or the fatherland, okay, Vaterland, okay, fatherland, mother country, okay, that is in Chinese called 祖国, okay, the mother country. In Chinese documents, Tibet was never considered. I mean, in Chinese documents, the Chinese never sort of suggested that the Tibetans could view China as 祖国, okay, motherland, okay. The term used is always 祖国, okay. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. 祖国 is owner country, master country. Okay, 主人 means that you're the owner of the slave. Okay, it's very different from being a father. This kid. Okay, are you his father or are you his 主人? That's a big difference. Okay, anybody with some basic knowledge of Chinese. So actually, what they're saying is that Britain is the master country. Again, I'm sure the Indians realize that Britain is not your father country, okay? It's not your motherland, okay? And the same thing over here. This Amban is saying that we have no intention to be the motherland of the Tibetans, but we want to be the master country of Tibet, okay? It will be difficult to prolong that. This, of course, is just a side issue, but also it's interesting. We'll read that. To prolong the ban against Indian tea imports and the custom revenue, blah, 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 and so forth, the custom duties should be suitably reduced. To resist this trend, we should break with the old thinking, introduce tea seedlings to Tibet. Now, this is actually an interesting part of history. Is that I'm sure all you know about Darjeeling tea and whatever, right? That the British, bought and stole tea seedlings from China, and after that, okay, China actually gave seedlings again in the 1860s, gave seedlings also to Nepal, but they never allowed seedlings to enter Tibet. So the Tibetans never had tea leaves until now when they am I running out of time?
No, I just want to make an intervention for the audience. See, look at the characters in Chinese. 朱国, the one on the left is Chinese characters which you could say are modern Chinese characters since post 1950. The other one, same, 朱国, are traditional Chinese characters. And look at the character for Kuo. You have a square inside which you have something similar to an eye with a line in between and another cross line below, a transverse line. That Kuo means country. So which very many ways tells you symbolically that a country is a square and all of us have to be inside that square, which tells you that psychologically, historically, culturally, the state has been a protector and also a controller of individuals. I leave it here.
Okay, is that all? Okay, thank you. So, let's see a continuation of that. If the Tibetans feel offended, don't blame me, okay? The Tibetan region covers 7,000 miles in both directions. The mineral deposits are unrivaled throughout the 5 continents. In future, it will definitely be our excellent colony, okay? And this statement implies 2 things. Is that, number one, at that time, it wasn't a colony yet, okay? But the purpose or what you might call the destiny of Tibet, okay, is that if the Qing government were to be successful, then the destiny of Tibet would be a colony, okay, would be an excellent colony. And then, of course, why does the Qing Empire want Tibet to be the colony is not because of any brotherly love or the fact that there was a common cultural background. It's never mentioned. Nothing about culture, nothing about ethnic affinity. It's because if it's managed by the right people, the benefits will double in 10 years. Our annual commercial profit will exceed 10 of millions. Okay? And this, of course, is an official report to the emperor by this Amban, which is considered as the most capable and the best Amban by the current PRC government. Okay? If you go to Dushu, if you go to Wikipedia, or if you go to Baidu, okay, the Chinese website, you search for Zhang Yingtang, okay, you see all these phrases by this guy. Okay, so that's his position. This is another one. Okay, this is 1907 December. If I go back, the preceding one was in February, the 2nd month, right? This is 2nd month, okay? 1907, 2nd month. And then after a few months, the Amban sends in another report. And so further elaborations on his earlier proposal. Tibet is vast but sparsely populated, rich in minerals. And so it's ripe for whatever, okay? Ripe for unification. Okay? So in future, it would be exploited as a colony. The grand officer stationed in Tibet, the Amban, has never taken. Now, this is by the current Amban writing a report to the emperor of a situation. Okay, so what he is saying is that in the past, the other Ambans, in other words, my predecessors, my preceding colleagues, has never taken care of governmental affairs and has long been despised by the Tibetans. He has no military support to suppress and appease and is unable to participate in any government matters. The British ridicule us for having no sovereignty in Tibet and for our failure to fulfill the obligations of a master nation. We indeed should feel ashamed. Okay? And that's what he says. And then, of course, as I've said, please don't feel offended. As to the likelihood that the Tibetan authorities will resist if we take over the government, this official humbly feels that the Tibetans are poor, weak, and stupid. At present, they have no ability to resist. Even if there were minor disturbances, 3,000 trained soldiers will be enough to suppress and placate them. Basically, he's asking the emperor, give me the money. I'm going to get in 3,000 soldiers from Sichuan, and then I'm going to take care of the Tibetans. Note that the British, okay, again, India it's going to be featured several times in this section, okay. Note that the British rule India by respecting the tradition and have the Indian people ruled by the indigenous kings who are in turn controlled. But now, whether it's true or not is again, I'm not trying to defend this, okay? This is the perception of the Amban, and the Amban is reporting to the emperor, okay? Who are in turn controlled by the government of India. Indians are used as low-ranking soldiers, but controlled and trained by the British officers. Everybody submits and remains docile. The way China governs Tibet must be like the way Britain governs India. Continue. His submission continues, okay? So, he says, the following draft proposed actions are modeled after the British India system. So this humble official hereby respectfully submits them for the view of your majesty. Number 1, establish the office of the Grand Executive Minister of Tibet to reflect blah, 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 and so forth. Note that the British governor of India adopts the royal protocol to control the Indian indigenous rajas, okay, kings, okay? For 100 years, now this again is interesting because if you remember, this is 1907, and it says for 100 years the Amban has lost its governing power. So even this particular Amban in 1907 acknowledges that for the 100 years they have lost the governing powers, implying that there was some time before that they had some power. But remember, the Qing official history already stated that the Qing Empire didn't even have, according to their claim, their own claim, they didn't have any power until 1792, okay? So if you count backwards from 1907, for 100 years, it's 1807. In other words, they stopped having power in 1807, but they started having power in 1792, according to their claim. That would mean that even to their own claim, they only had power for 15 years, okay? But that's still according to their own claim, okay? They only had for 15 years. Anyway, this is okay. This is even more interesting, okay? And if the Indians feel insulted, again, I'm sorry about that. Okay, this ambassador is a real diplomat, a real politician. He turns around and then takes a totally different position. Remember, just now we were looking at all his submissions to the Imperial Court of China, sort of advocating that we have to deal with the Tibetans exactly like the way the British deal with the Indians. Okay, but right now he is also trying to do his public relations work to the Tibetans. So he came up with this article, okay, and he was trying to sort of talk to the Tibetans. And you see what he tells the Tibetans is like that. He said, basically the idea is that don't listen to this English people, okay? You have to be close to the Chinese, because if you listen to British people, you'll be in big trouble. And that is, you see, the various foreign kings and rajas in India competed for power among themselves. The British exploited the situation and wiped out the country, and the sons and grandsons of generations after generations become slaves of foreigners. And what they're saying is that these Indians are now the slaves of the British, okay? Don't ever become the slaves of the British if you want to come to China. But remember, he was telling the emperor something just the opposite. If you combine the two, you get a very embarrassing conclusion, and that this guy is actually advocating that the Tibetans would be, slaves generations after generations, okay? So anyway, this is from the subsequent Amban, Lifanyuan. Okay, Lifanyuan is the governor. Is the grand officer station in Tibet after Zhang Yintang. Okay, actually it's about the same time. Okay, 1908, 1907. So he has this suggestion. At that time, China was trying to adopt the Western constitutional monarchy system, okay, and they were trying to establish new systems and new laws, and they were trying to impose it throughout the country, and they were trying to get this Amban to try to institute that also in Tibet, and that is the Amban's again report to the emperor. For there are many differences between the Fan regions and the provinces. Note that Tibet's culture. Somebody was asked. I think the lady is not here, but the lady was asking me whether there are other cultural factors to be considered between the Tibetans and the Chinese, okay? And this is the opinion of the Amban. Note that Tibet's culture, religion, government, and customs are not only different from the interior region provinces, they're also different from those in Inner and Outer Mongolia. In fact, what he's saying is that their differences with us is even bigger than the difference between the Mongolians and us, okay? The region has only a Fan relationship with us, and the people are of an alien race. They're not of the same race, they are 异种, okay, in Chinese. For years, they act arrogantly, secretly going against us, strengthen the military on their own, and resist us whenever an issue arises. Their stubborn inability to assess their own virtues and capabilities makes them irrational and totally beyond reasoning. The only way to subdue them is through military might. Then maybe we could coexist without incident. If we ever implement constitutional reform, we'll lose our sovereignty over them. People in the Fan region never willingly, this is very true, okay? Again, this is very honest. People in the Fan region never, 10 minutes. Never willingly submit to the master country. Correspondingly, the master country can never treat them as people in their own country. It's noted that among all the powerful Western countries, none ever gives constitutional privileges to the alien races in the Fan regions. Examples are the way, pardon me again, okay, the way Britain handles India, the US handles the Philippines, France handles Vietnam, Holland handles Java. However, as for Australia and Canada, because the race of the settlers is the same as the mother country, Britain, therefore they get the same rights as the people of the mother country. Britain treats the other foreign regions differently. Okay? And it's not that bad because you have to remember the background. This is, of course, I mean, I'm talking about quite a lot of years ago, but anyway. Now, we are emulating Western European countries in our constitutional reform. We should also emulate them in handling the foreign regions. In other words, we are emulating them in giving democracy to our own people, but to these alien races, okay, then don't give it to them. Okay, in other words, it's just that in Britain, they treat the Australians, the white Canadians very differently compared to the ways they treat the Indians. Okay, this slave, which is me, okay, I mean the Lian Yi, they call themselves slaves in front of the emperor. This slave has thoroughly discussed this matter with which is the other associate Amban, and we agree with each other, and therefore I dare to submit this report honestly. Imperial reigning comment. Okay, you can see these are actual archival records. Okay, and so you have the emperor. Actually, at that time it was the dowager, the empress. Okay, who was actually controlling this. Let the Constitutional Government Coordination Control Inspection Office learn about this report by imperial order. Okay, now those kinds of attitudes were shared not just by the officers, but it was sort of agreed upon by the emperor. So I want to go back to this table, which shows you in detail the personnel structure of the Lifanyuan. Okay, you have all these positions in the leadership. Okay, that's a minister of Lifanyuan. Okay, the archival office, executive office, blah blah blah, and all these offices. And then these are the supporting texts from the Qing history draft. This information, you get it from all these official documents published by the Qing government. In my book, I have the full sort of the extract of it from the Qing history draft. The Qing history draft, of course, is the most recent of all these publications, so it reflects the most recent sort of, because of course through the 267 years, the staff structure, of course, they were revised from time to time, but the basic structure remains the same. And as you can see over here is that this Lifanyuan, which the PRC translates into, remember, the Office of Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs, okay, which is a translation. Actually, you can see over here at the leadership level, these are all the quotas, okay, the positions have been fixed. 4 Manchurians, Mongolian, no Han, no Tibetan, okay, and then it goes lower, these are lower positions, okay, more senior positions, 2, 3, 1, okay, and then you can see that the Hans is altogether 13, and they actually only occupy the lowest position. They are scribes. The Hans were given jobs as scribes, okay. The Manchurians, of course, occupy a senior position. The middle position they shared with the Mongolians. So actually, there are more Mongolians, okay. There are more Mongolians, or in 55 positions compared to the Manchurians. But the Manchurians, of course, control everything. And then, of course, what's more interesting is the treasury. The treasury, of course, only Manchurians. They control the money, okay? Even the Mongolians don't get to say anything about money. And then please note that the Hans, of course, there were 13, and the Tibetans, it's all 0, okay? In other words, this office couldn't possibly have any duties or power in running, or in managing, rather, Tibetan affairs. What they did was, as I've explained last time, was they handle ceremonial matters like so-called tributary envoys coming in, okay, and giving them gifts and so forth. I think I'm running out of time, even though, should I stop now? Yeah, okay, fine.
2 minutes.
No, I don't think 2 minutes will make any difference. I think I'll just stop over here. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Sir, who is
Thank
Yan Tang?
What?
Yan Tang.
Zhang Yin Tang. Yeah, in Mandarin it's pronounced as Zhang Yin Tang.
Who was he?
Well, as I said, he is one of the few and one of the very few Han Chinese who were given the position of the Amban, or the what you call the Grand Officer station in Tibet. And he was considered as a very capable and a very virtuous officer by the PRC press and by the PRC group of scholars.
So,
Sir,
just a
this
minute, please.
one more question is that Mongolia was part of China in the time of Dr. Sun Yat-sen. After the communist takeover, Mongolia separated from China.
Well, that is partially true. Again, that's debatable. There will be another topic that we can spend 10 hours debating, okay? The generally accepted version is this. The generally accepted version is that there's this Mongolia which already became, sorry, I thought this thing works, right? Yeah. There was Mongolia, there was already somehow divided into a northern Mongolia and a southern Mongolia, which is what's Outer Mongolia and Inner Mongolia. And then the Outer Mongolian people are more interested in independence, okay? And the Inner Mongolian people in general, they're more willing to be part of the Qing Empire, okay? And they were more dependent and more subordinate. And then when the 1911 sort of a revolution that toppled the imperial dynasty of Qing, the Outer Mongolia, they wanted to secede, but then eventually they were prevented from doing that, and then they got a help of, at that time, the Soviet Russia, and Soviet Russia actually helped the Outer Mongolia people to what you might call win independence, and eventually the ROC agreed to it and later reneged, but then strangely the People's Republic of China strongly supported the independence of Outer Mongolia because he wanted to please Soviet Russia, because Soviet Russia was saying that I want Outer Mongolia to be independent. The Chinese were, of course, very mad deep inside, but outwardly they didn't dare to show the anger because it was something that the Russians wanted, and so they agreed. And so, yeah, so Outer Mongolia became dependent. So that was, I would think that is a rather objective statement of what happened. But again, there are so many incriminations and so many finger pointing. A lot of Chinese today are very mad that the Outer Mongolia region was ever allowed to secede. And some blame the Chinese communists, some blame the Republic of China, which is coming down. And as I say, you know, we have to go into the detail. We have to really go into the regional records like that to find out who is right and who is wrong.
So that means that Mongolia was part of the Qing dynasty empire.
I would think that most people would say yes. But again, then you have to look at that. It's classified as a fund. So again, we come back to this same old question, okay? When you're classified as a white fund, who are you? And if to make things complicated, it's because the Qing emperors, many of the emperors, they have used the word white fund to label not only the Tibetans and the Mongolians, they also use it to label the Russians and even the British, okay? And also, as one of the passages that I've shown, the extracts, they also then indicate that even though Mongolia and Tibetans, they are both white fund, but even among them, between them, the differences, Mongolia is closer to the empire, to the Hans, and these Tibetans are real alien people. So, I mean, it's complicated, okay? But I think what is generally agreed by these passages, and of course, just like the census figure, Qing Empire had detailed census figures for the Mongolia region. Qing has a separate code of laws for the Mongolia region, okay? But Qing Empire did not collect tax, and Qing doesn't have a tax code for the Tibetans. So one would argue that, yeah, Mongolia could be considered as part of China in a loose way. Yeah.
Hello, sir. So in 1948, Tibet's finance minister Tsepin Shagapa, he actually went to went for a trade mission in UK, right?
Yeah.
And that trade mission was it was named as a trade mission, but it was mostly to have an international recognition of Tibet's sovereignty, right? So his passport, I think that can also prove for the sovereignty of Tibet. So I want to ask, like, why haven't you touched on this? Maybe China's...
Yeah, there are a lot of materials I haven't touched on. My book is 850 pages and I have only so many hours. So yeah, what you have stated is one of the things that I have mentioned in my book, but I didn't have time. There are many. That factor is actually a very weak factor. You know why? And I have actually a stronger factor to help you out. And the reason is this. If you think about it, the fact that a rebel government, because if let me play the part of a devil's advocate. I'm the PRC. I'll say, okay, the fact that you have a bunch of rebels in Tibet that would send a team to visit troublemakers like the British people, what does it prove? Okay, so the British are willing to show the support to a bunch of rebels, okay? They've always been making trouble with the Chinese anyway, okay? Why should that mean anything? Point number one. Point number two is that, okay, so Tibet has issued passports to these people to go to. Anybody today can print a passport. Even I today can print a passport of my name is Lau, okay? I'll say the Lau Kingdom, okay? I'll print a passport and give it to you, okay? So what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. What is even more important, though, is that, and which is what is in my book, is that, you see, the fact that the Tibetan government, or a bunch of rebels, like I call them, okay, the fact that they have printed a booklet and give it to their own people to travel to England doesn't prove that they have any stature. However, that is actually proof in the Chinese records that when the Chinese were sending officers to Tibet towards the end of the Qing dynasty, the Chinese government issued passports for these officers to gain entry into Tibet. This is a much stronger proof, okay? Because that would mean that the Qing government themselves recognize that for their officers to enter Tibet, they have to show a passport to the Tibetan government at the time. And in my book, I will give you the citation of the Chinese archival records.
And I wanted to know, like...
Buy my book, okay? Next, but unfortunately, again, it's in Chinese. Learn Chinese.
So...
what's the possibility for is there any plan to translate that into English?
Well, for the next 2 years, I'm going to try to do that, but I have only so much time. Yeah, actually, I'll be happy if somebody would take over the translation, but nobody wants to take over the translation. If you're willing to help me to translate, I'll be happy to let you do it. Because my Chinese book, it's for free. I mean, I didn't collect any royalty. It was all done by voluntary work, by even the publishing, whatever, and then whatever proceeds will be donated. So if anybody wants to do it for free and translate in English, please tell me you're willing to help. Otherwise, it will
be more.
What?
If the book is in English or it's translated into English, readership will be more.
Oh, I know that.
India,
Definitely.
Europe,
Yeah,
America.
But I have to write it in Chinese because the material, they're all in Chinese. Okay? All these archival records, okay, they are all in Chinese. So I have to, first of all, organize them all in Chinese. Then I have to think about how to translate it, because translation is, just out of fun. Such a word fun, okay? I mean, how do I translate it? And remember to think about the Amban, 驻藏大臣 Grand Officer Station in Tibet. Now that thing I have to explain to the non-Chinese speakers, okay, the structure. All those things is a lot more difficult. If I were to just write in Chinese, okay, then the Chinese will understand what I'm talking about.
Geshe-la, I think we should take his suggestion seriously, because there are Tibetan students who are studying in Taiwan, and in Taiwan they practice only the traditional characters. And I think in Singapore also it's traditional characters more than Mandarin from the mainland, not the simplified characters. So
yeah, we can talk about that
translation-
later on if you want to, but
Yes.
it's not as easy as you think. And I don't think I want to go around begging people and say, I have this manuscript, could you please help me to translate it? Okay?
No, also it will be a force multiplier
Yeah.
if the book can be translated not only in English but also in Tibetan.
Yes,
So
there
the
is a Tibetan that's doing the
yes.
translation in Tibetan. I already have a
Yes.
Tibetan who is doing the work of translating into Tibetan. Yeah.
And before the next question, just a quick, not an intervention, but the key thing you must have noticed in his presentation was Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs Commission, MTAC. Believe me, till 2010, there was a Mongolian and Tibetan Affairs Commission in Taiwan.
There's
Which-
still one. They haven't disbanded yet.
They haven't disbanded, but it is a toothless organization.
Well, yeah.
Because thanks to the Kuomintang, in 2010, when Ma Ying-jeou was their president, elected president, he disbanded the MTAC with, I mean, no funds. And till then, they used to offer lavish scholarships. That has ended. And secondly, this shows me the continuity and also discontinuity, because to me, the KMT, the Kuomintang, and also the CCP, Kungchendang, they have the same view when it comes to Tibet, that Tibet is China. And this is something which puzzles me in the sense one has evolved into becoming a democracy, the other is a one-party state, although it calls itself, hold your breath, a multi-party state, where all the other parties swear by the leadership of the Communist Party of China. That is a multi-party state on the mainland. So these are complications which I'm sure, I mean, he'll be looking into it later, but more questions, please. Yes, sir.
So, thank you so much. You have given wealth of information and documentary evidence that Tibet was an independent country. I have two comments on this. One is when there were dialogue between His Holiness the Dalai Lama representative and the Chinese government many years back, there were series of dialogue. Was this information available to the Tibetan government? This is my one question. Which
I'm sorry, information of what that's available?
what you have presented.
Okay.
This question may also be answered by Geshe-la. And I think for the present, this question.
Okay, well, this time I've been invited by Geshe Damdul, okay, which is, of course, I think that you're closely associated with the CTA. You don't have to answer that question. And of course, I've been invited to Dharamshala, and I made a number of presentations in Dharamshala. And I also, of course, was asked to have a meeting with Dalai Lama. So yeah, they are aware of my work. And in fact, the book that's being published in Chinese right now is published by a publisher, which is openly sort of affiliated unit. It's basically the publishing arm of the Dalai Lama's office in Taiwan. Yeah, they know about, except that I try to keep a distance in the sense that, for example, my book has sort of no recommendations or no introductions or whatever written by Tibetans or whether it's basically it's a basic Chinese book for Chinese. Okay, I mean this particular publisher, they have published books that are pro-Tibet, and they would always include introductions or recommendations by prominent Tibetan figures. My book doesn't have anything. Okay, my book has basically just what I'm talking about. I'm not trying to say that this thing has the support of whatever Tibetans Does that answer your question? Yeah, yes, the CTA is very well aware of what I'm doing. See, actually, personally, I think that one of the reasons why I'm documenting this is that if one day the Tibetan, not the Tibetan government, I'm sorry, the CTA, if the CTA wants to, I think the CTA once attempted to bring this case to the International Court, and I think they were told that they didn't have enough evidence, okay? And I hope that the material is in my book. If one day they want to try it again, this will give them some ammunition. You know? Yeah. But that's their decision. I mean, I keep telling people I'm not Tibetan. I'm sorry.
At that time, this information, was it available?
What's that?
When there were talks between a representative of His Holiness and Chinese government, were this information available that time?
I'm sorry. This information is available at what time?
At the time of negotiation between His Holiness and the
No. I started sort of publicizing my research findings. I think the first time was 2 years ago. Okay, the first talk that I gave was a public talk. Well, I gave some talks to my students or whatever when I was still teaching in Hong Kong, and that was in 2012, 2011. But the real public one that attracted the attention of the mainland Chinese sort of the agencies was when I gave a talk in Taiwan, which is organized by, among other people, the Dalai Lama's office in Taiwan. Okay, and then eventually, then it was in Brussels. It was very, very international. So, but it was 2 years ago. Yeah, in other words, it came too late. But
I was just wondering whether the attitude of PRC is different towards the Chinese diaspora or the Chinese people who have fled China vis-a-vis the Tibetans who have fled Tibet?
oh, the nature is totally different. There's no relationship. There's no resemblance, and of course, their
So
attitude.
how is it different in the sense, how are they treated? The Chinese and the Tibetan
Well, the
diaspora?
Tibetans perceive that their homeland has been taken away by a foreign country, okay? And if these Tibetans left, it's because they left because their perception is that they were being oppressed by a foreign ethnic group or foreign power. The Chinese, like me, for example, my parents left China voluntarily, and it was because they viewed it as a chance to have a better job, better income in a British colony because they went to Singapore. They of course didn't think highly of the Chinese government at the time, but strangely, I think this is true with a lot of countries. The Chinese who emigrated to Hong Kong and to Singapore, okay, they don't actually blame the Chinese government for not having taken care of them very well. In fact, even though they emigrated to a British colony, well, even today you see a lot of Chinese that go to the United States, okay? They make much nicer salaries, okay? They have freedom, whatever, but they're still very loyal to China. And in fact, the joke is that they go to the United States, they complain about the United States, they complain about American government. First they go individually, then they bring in the wife, then they bring the kids, then they bring the parents, okay? And after they bring in the parents and the kids and then the wife, okay, then they start condemning the United States. And I always say, why do you go back to China? Okay, but no, they on one hand, they recognize that that their livelihood would be much worse in China, but on the other hand, they're very pro-China. And this is the beauty of Chinese education. But I guess you see that in many countries. I'm sure actually I see that among the Indians, to be honest with you. Okay, you see a lot of Indians that actually behave very, very similarly. They emigrate to the United States. They have good jobs. But they're always talking about all these Indian customs, okay, and how great they are now. And then of course sometimes I hint the same way. I say, well, why do you go back to India? I'm sorry, but you have asked me a question that my only answer that I can give you that is honest is also very blunt and unpleasant. I'm sorry, but do you see my point? No, I find it very amusing that and also very awe-inspiring and also very frightening. I see it very frightening that somehow the communists are able to educate Chinese in such a way that the Chinese somehow believe that if they're in a foreign country, no matter how well they are doing in these foreign countries, they need not be thankful to these foreign countries because they are foreigners. And no matter how badly they were treated in China, they still should be loyal to the Chinese government, not China. They have to be loyal to the Chinese government in power because that's the motherland. That's what they believe in. I mean, these people suffered a lot when they were in China, but then after they left China, okay, because they couldn't stand the suffering, they still want to be loyal to not China, the government of China. And because they equate the governor of China with the motherland. Now, I personally think that I don't see why. I mean, I'm a very patriotic person. Okay, I spend all my time reading Chinese books. Okay, as you can see. Okay, I mean, obviously, I couldn't have come up with all these passages and all these extracts without having read a lot of Chinese books. I spend all my time in Chinese culture. Okay, but the way I look at it is that simply because I'm loyal to Chinese culture doesn't mean that I should be loyal to the Chinese government that is occupying China. Okay, but I'm the minority.
Would you say that Chinese have a weakness for authoritarianism?
Not any more than other countries, frankly. Not really, honestly. Well, I mean, okay, you're really forcing me to say this. If you look at India, for example, you have the Kashmir problem, you have the problem, between the Muslims and the Hindus, and if you think about it, okay, the way they behave and the way they react is really not that different from the way the Chinese react to the Tibetan problem, okay? And also the way things are taught. I mean, most Chinese would react very violently once you talk about Tibet problem. Is that Tibet has always been part of us. Who told you so? Well, I've always been told that way. Tibet has always been part of China, and if you try to take away Tibet, it's like you're taking away a part of my flesh. Where did you get the history facts? Did you actually check the sources? Well, I don't know how many Indians check their sources when it comes to question like, whatever. India has, again, a lot of ethnic groups, right? I mean, did you check the original sources about how they came about and how India came about? There was no India. I mean, there was all these Maharajas and Rajas, right? And they have different religions, okay? But today there's an India.
Ma'am,
it becomes a very, I'm sorry, I don't want to say further, otherwise they're going to hit me.
It's quite complicated, but as
That's my
Indians, we find it difficult to go to Tibet, and we can only go in groups of 7, and the 8th person will be a Chinese, in double quotes, guide. And because 8 is a lucky number in China, as an individual I can't go to Tibet. So it at one level reveals insecurities. At another level, we reveal our insecurities by not allowing foreigners to go to parts of our country where there are political issues. And so both the countries have their own fair share of internal issues which need to be deliberated, discussed, and political settlements found. Another aspect is that as a student of international relations, international politics, Sino-Indian relations, etc., Tibet is a very alive issue these days. And it is not a domestic issue for a very simple reason. We Indians as a people, we are not concerned about foreign policy. If there is foreign policy which the average Indian talks about, it is to do with terrorism which comes from our northwestern dear neighbor Pakistan. Apart from that, we don't discuss politics, international politics at all. And very few people in India discuss issues like sovereignty. We speak in English, we discuss sovereignty. But I have not come across any writings in the vernacular. Only in a few vernacular languages like Bengali and maybe Malayalam and Tamil. That's it. And it puzzles me that there are two surprisingly successful long-term democracies in Asia, India and Japan. And these are two outstanding democracies who have outstanding territorial disputes with all their neighbors. In Japan's case, maritime; in India's case, territorial, and till a couple of years back, even maritime. Maritime has to do with Tibettv, an island in dispute between Sri Lanka and India, where fisher people from both the countries used to fight over the fishing reserves or whatever it is, or the fish catch that comes seasonally. That was settled. But otherwise, Japan and India, we have outstanding territorial disputes with all our neighbors. Not settled. With Bangladesh, Teen Biga corridor has been officially settled but not been implemented. With Myanmar, there is the issue of the Rohingyas, and there are parts where even I as an Indian citizen can't go in the northeast of our country. When it comes to Arunachal Pradesh, China claims Arunachal. China used to claim Sikkim till 2003, when the then Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee went to Sikkim and broke all protocol and insisted on just crossing the so-called boundary, not demarcated, and shocked the station commander on the Indian side. He was a Prime Minister. He just crossed over, shook hands with the Chinese counterpart, the PLA commander there, who was equally shocked, and then came back. A week after that, China dropped a web page on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which I remember very clearly used to say, China does not recognize the illegal occupation and annexation of Sikkim by the Republic of India in 1975. Till then, they used to have a separate web page called China-Sikkim Relations. 1 week after late Atal Bihari Vajpayee's crossover and return immediately, that web page disappeared. Do a Google search, that it will say this page is not to be found. That is a Chinese way of acknowledging that Sikkim is India's. And when Doklam happened, people in our country were only talking about China being very aggressive. Yes, they are aggressive. Second, we completely lost out the message that was being sent not to India. It was to Bhutan, with whom we have a territorial dispute. Chinese are very lavish in settling boundary disputes with neighbors who are small and who pose no threat in security terms and economic terms. But Chinese were debating as to how can a republic, we Indians do not understand, Bhutan is no longer a monarchy. It is a constitutional monarchy with an elected democracy. And they fail to understand, Chinese, how can a republic have a foreign policy decided by another country, which is India? So this what Doklam happened to pressurize the Bhutanese to settle the boundary dispute, which none of our esteemed anchors on television, I'm not naming them, but they refused to, acknowledge this or even understand. It was just laughed at. Then of course I'm not getting into Pakistan or even Nepal. With Nepal we have a territorial dispute which can be settled easily, but which won't be because of domestic issues on their side which spilled over onto our side. And we, I think, overstretched ourselves by blocking trade and transit with Nepal, and nobody knows how many Nepalese died for lack of medicines. And Pakistan, I'm not getting into that. It'll take, he took 8 hours. I could take 80 hours to discuss that. So, he's the guest of honor. And any more questions, please, in the sense, if there are no questions, I think, sure.
Hello. With this This two-day lecture series has successfully come to an end, and it has been most wonderful and enriching experience for everyone present here. So the history of Ming and Qing dynasties were very particular, Professor, particular and precise, which did justice to prove Tibet as an independent nation and was never a part of China since from antiquity, which disproved People's Republic of China's claim of historic sovereignty over Tibet. So with this thought, I would like to request our director, Venerable Geshe Dorje Damdula, to kindly present souvenir and kada to our speakers and chairperson. Professor Lau.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Jeda, Professor Ravi.
Is this better? What? Oh. Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la. And with heartfelt gratitude, we would like to thank Professor Lau for coming all the way from Singapore only for this lecture, and we hope that you will visit India again and enlighten us again.
Thank you.
And Professor Ravi for chairing the session, and we thank you very much, and Venerable Geshe-la for always guiding us for every programs, and Tibettv for covering this lecture, and my colleagues for working tirelessly, and without your support, this lecture wouldn't be possible. So I would like to bring curtain over this enriching two-day lecture series, and thank you, good night, and we'll see you in our next conferences.